The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. So, before we get started with tonight's episode, we just want to remind everybody that if you have any supernatural stories, things that you have experienced in your own life, whether you think it was a ghost, or it's a cryptid story, or a UFO story, we'd really like to hear them. So if you would type them up and email them to us at whereourmindswander@gmail.com, we would love to read them and then share them during our Halloween episode on October 30th.
Yeah, it would be great. Like we said before, it was a couple years ago we did this. And we had a pretty good turnout.
We did. And it's nice to hear other stories and know that, the things that we've experienced aren't just in our heads.
Well, it's nice to sit back and listen to someone else's stories instead of us putting together an episode of just the things we like.
Right. So if you have a story that you'd like to share and you want to be part of our show, just email them to us before September 20th, so we have time to put them all together. And again, the email is whereourmindswander@gmail.com.
All right, and you know what? I think that's about it for our housekeeping tonight. I'm ready to get right into our stories.
We have a couple really good ones this week.
Really good. They're awesome for October, for the spooky season.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, get your favorite beverage, sit back, get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights. And Beth has a great story to kick off tonight. It's pretty creepy. It has nuns, adultery, political intrigue, some pretty wild demonic possessions, and murder.
It has all the things.
It checks all the boxes for October.
It is a crazy story, and I can't believe we waited this long to tell it. So in 1632, King Louis XIII ordered that the walls around the town of Loudun in Poitou, France, be torn down. The Catholics in Loudun who supported the king were all for it, but the Huguenots who didn't support the king weren't very happy about it. Not long after, in May of that year, the plague swept through Loudun, which decimated a huge portion of the town's population. There was an Ursuline convent in Loudun, which housed 17 nuns. The prioress, Jean d'Angers, was highly respected by the younger women, whose average age was 25, and she was respected by the people of Loudun. The same could not be said about the Saint Pierre du Marché parish priest, Urbain Grandier, who had come to Loudun in 1617. Grandier was apparently quite the good-looking man. He came from a wealthy family, and he was well educated. He had also been in support of keeping the wall around Loudun, which meant he had some enemies in the town who felt that he was disloyal to both the king and Cardinal Richelieu. He was also known for having affairs with several of the parish's married women. And it was rumored and gossiped about that he'd fathered a child with Philippa Trincant, the daughter of the king's lawyer. When Jacques Thibault, one of Philippa's relatives, went around town ranting about Grandier's behavior, Grandier confronted him right on the steps of the church and demanded to know why he was talking about him. Thibault responded by beating Grandier with his cane right on the steps of the church in front of everyone. And then in 1630, Grandier was put on trial for adultery. The trial, according to Wikipedia, was basically a parade of witnesses who all spoke out against Grandier. There were fellow priests who claimed that they'd actually caught Grandier lying on the ground with women, and they'd seen women visiting him in his chambers at all hours of the day and night. There were also plenty of Grandier supporters, and in the end, he was acquitted. And then in 1632, things started to get weird. 5 months after the plague outbreak, one of the nuns, Sister Martha de Saint Monique, came to the Mother Superior, Jean d'Angers, and said that she had seen the apparition of Father Mousant, who had died from the plague during the outbreak. To Sister Martha's surprise, the Mother Superior, the Sub-Prioress, and Sister de Colombier said they had seen Father Mousant's ghost too. When they compared stories, they all agreed that the deceased man had asked them for help. According to bps.org, encyclopedia.com, and thecollector.com, over the next few weeks, a whole bunch of really weird stuff started to happen. At first, it was a black orb just floating through the halls. Then one or two of the other nuns came forward to say they'd been frightened by the sight of skeletons wandering down the halls. Then a few more of the nuns spoke up and began reporting that an invisible force had pushed them, or that at times they'd felt a physical blow to their bodies as if an unseen hand had punched them. Some of the nuns were experiencing uncontrollable fits of laughter. By October, a month after Father Mousant's ghost was seen, the Mother Superior had felt an unseen hand wrap around her fist and squeeze. When she'd finally been able to open her hand, she found 3 bloody hawthorn thorns embedded in her palm. Soon after that, none of the 17 nuns in the Ursuline convent were safe from whatever demon had infested their space. They were going into convulsions and speaking in tongues. At other times, and this is the stuff of horror movies, they were bending over backwards, grabbing their own ankles, and walking like that. When standing or sitting normally, suddenly they'd whip their heads from side to side and their tongues would dart out of their mouths, only their tongues were black and covered in pimples. At other times, they'd even expose themselves and encourage lewd behavior while shouting out foul things. All of these things are on record because, of course, word got out, and Canon Jean Mignon, the chaplain at the convent, had done several exorcisms to try and drive out whatever demon was possessing them. And in many cases, these exorcisms were done in public. Word had spread so quickly about the Loudun Possessions that people came from as far away as England to witness them. At first, the nuns claimed to be possessed by a demon named Asmodai. Asmodai, or Asmodeus, was well known to the clergy in 1632. He was mentioned prominently in a 3rd century text, the Testament of Solomon, and predicted that King Solomon's kingdom would be divided. Asmodai, who was a Nephilim, or child of an angel father and a human mother, had a fear of water and was often thwarted by the angel Raphael. In the witch-hunting book, the Malleus Maleficarum, published in 1486, Asmodeus was the demon of lust. He was quite powerful, ranking just below Lucifer in hell, and he had 72 demonic legions under his command. He was seen as both the Prince of Revenge and the overseer of all things related to gambling. In some texts, he was closely related to the demon Abaddon. But then the nuns changed their story, and they said it wasn't Asmodai, it was a local priest who had bewitched them, or it was Zabulon, the 6th son of Jacob and Leah in the Bible, and the founder of the Israelite tribe of the same name. The exorcisms did little to help the nuns, and after a week, they began saying that the demon possessing them had been conjured by someone else entirely, Urbain Grandier. The nuns, by the way, had never even met Grandier, and he immediately filed a petition saying that they were slandering his name and ruining his reputation even more. At this point, Canon Mignon appealed to local physicians to come examine the nuns, and they were all sequestered behind the convent's walls, with no contact with the outside world. The episodes of laughing fits, lewd behavior, and walking while bent over backwards, and black tongues seemed to die down considerably. But it was still happening, and the bizarre behavior had spread to other towns. At this point, Cardinal Richelieu himself got involved. According to Encyclopedia.com, he appointed a commission to carry out even more exorcisms, behind closed doors this time. And each time they seemed to make a little progress, but then the demon seemed to double its efforts and come back even stronger. Urbain Grandier was arrested on suspicion of sorcery. First, his body was examined for marks of the devil, or for any marks indicating that he was a dark magician. Reportedly, several were found. Then they demanded to know how he was gaining entry to the convent, since several witnesses were now claiming that they had seen him inside. Through it all, Grandier insisted that he was innocent and had nothing to do with it. The local magistrates insisted that if it were true, then he should perform exorcisms on the nuns himself. It didn't work, of course, and Grandier found himself on trial for witchcraft. During his trial, a book filled with various papers was produced as evidence. These papers were written backwards in Latin and supposedly were pacts with various demons, including Satan himself, and were apparently signed with the names of Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Leviathan. Grandier had signed his own name on each one in blood. These demon deals allegedly promised Grandier the love of women, wealth, and worldly honor. The kicker was, everyone agreed that they were unquestionably written in Grandier's own handwriting. Locals began publishing their own versions of these pacts and selling them on the streets. But if you want to see one of the originals, there is one at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. The trial lasted for 2 years, and Grandier was tortured off and on for most of it. One of the tortures that he endured was known as the boot. There were 2 different forms of the boot, the Malay boot and the Spanish boot. The Malay boot was made up of 4 pieces of wooden board that were nailed together and made specifically to fit the victim's leg. Once the person's leg was encased, wedges were hammered between the boards, causing so much pressure and pain that the victim often passed out. The Spanish boot was similar, but it was made out of iron instead of wood, and it often broke the tibia and bones in the person's leg. It's unclear which type was used on Urbain Grandier. In the end, Grandier was found guilty of sorcery and was expected to be burned at the stake. His sentencing read, quote, "We have ordered and do order the said Urbain Grandier duly tried and convicted of the crime of magic, maleficia, and of causing demoniacal possession of several Ursuline nuns of this town of Loudun, as well as of other secular women, together with other charges and crimes resulting therefrom. For atonement of which we have condemned and do condemn the said Grandier to make amende honorable, his head bare, a rope around his neck, holding in his hand a burning taper weighing 2 pounds, before the principal door of the church of Saint Pierre du Marché, and before that of Saint Ursula of this town. There on his knees to ask pardon of God, the king, and the law. This done, he is to be taken to the public square of Saint Croix, and fastened to a stake on a scaffold, which shall be erected on the said place for this purpose, and there to be burned alive, and his ashes scattered to the wind. We have ordered and so do order that each and every article of his movable property be acquired and confiscated by the king. The sum of 500 livres first being taken for buying a bronze plaque, on which will be engraved the abstract of this present trial, to be set up in a prominent spot in the said church of the Ursulines, to remain there for all eternity. And before proceeding to the execution of the present sentence, we order the said Grandier to be submitted to the first and last degrees of torture concerning his accomplices." Grandier never named any accomplices, but he was given some leniency. He would be hanged before his body was burned. On the day of his execution, as Grandier tried to speak his last words, a right that he was also granted, the local monks threw so much holy water in his face that no one could make out what he said. The huge crowd was enraged and demanded that Grandier be set on fire. And afraid of a mob, the executioner lit the pyre before his neck was snapped. The rope itself caught on fire, and Grandier's body fell into the flames. Seeing his awful mistake, the executioner leapt forward to try and put Grandier out of his misery. But as he did, the flames erupted into a massive, roiling fire, and there was nothing he could do. Grandier was burned alive. The irony is that after all of this, the nuns of Loudun continued to show signs of possession for another 2 years. In fact, according to thecollector.com, the demon, or whatever it was that was possessing the nuns, began possessing other people who interacted with them, including the judge from Grandier's trial, a surgeon, and another priest. Father Jean-Joseph Surin came to the convent and performed several exorcisms on the Mother Superior, Jean d'Angers, begging the demonic spirit to leave her body and possess him instead. And apparently, it did. All of the weird stuff stopped at the convent, and Jean and her nuns were set free. Although Jean was allegedly left with 4 names inscribed permanently on the palm of her hand: Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and St. Francis de Sales. So, what the heck actually happened to the nuns at Loudun? Well, that's been up for debate pretty much ever since it happened. Some scholars argue that Jean d'Angers orchestrated the whole thing, coercing her nuns into following her lead because she had agreed to put an end to Urbain Grandier. Who she might have been in cahoots with has never really been determined. But was Urbain Grandier put to death over nothing? It seems quite possible. Or maybe he really did make a deal with the devil to possess the nuns. But then the question becomes, why? No one can really answer that either.
Well, here's the thing I want to know. Perhaps it was a hoax, and she persuaded her fellow colleagues, the other nuns, to go in on it with her to get back at him. But how in the hell did they bend over backwards and crawl like that? I mean, there had to have been some older nuns. You'd have to be pretty damn flexible.
Well, their average age was 25, although I don't think that makes much difference. But you also don't know how much of those documents from the 1600s were exaggerated.
Right.
You know? And power of suggestion. I mean, who knows if she got them to go in on it with her, or whether she was so influential in their lives
that they believed it.
And so then they started to think that it was happening to them. But the part that gets me is that they didn't even know the guy. They didn't even know him. They'd never met him. And yet he was the person that they named. So it seems a little conspiracy-ish to me.
Perhaps so.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, there you have it. What do you think? And we'll be right back after this Who'da Thunk It.
Hey, did you know? Vampire bats aren't the only flying creatures that drink blood. There's also some blood-drinking butterflies. When they do this, it's not because they're beautiful little vampires, but because they are simply trying to get the nutrients out of any moisture they can find. It's called mud puddling, and some butterflies have also been known to suck the nutrients out of dung, urine, and even tears. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we are back from the break, and tonight I'm going to be telling all you fellow wanderers about the most haunted house in America, the Whaley House, on the east side of San Diego Avenue in San Diego. Built by merchant Thomas Whaley in 1857, the Greek Revival-style brick home cost $10,000 to construct, which is about $400,000 in today's money. It looks like a cross between a Southern plantation house and a Wild West saloon, with its flat roof and white columns. According to SanDiegoHistory.org, Thomas Whaley was born into a wealthy New York family in October 1823. He was child number 7 out of 10. His family history could be traced back 800 years in England and all through early colonization of the New World. Whaley's ancestors had made their money through selling guns, and when General George Washington needed muskets during the Revolutionary War, Alexander Whaley provided them, and the Whaley's home became Washington's headquarters. Thomas Whaley Sr. ran several businesses, including the manufacture of surveyor tools. When he died, his widow Rachel took over the businesses, and she also bought quite a bit of property, some of which later became Central Park. Thomas Sr. and Rachel had several children, including a son Thomas, who took over his father's locksmithing business. One day, an article about gold in California caught his eye, and before long, he decided that he, too, had to see California for himself. He packed up some of his grandfather's muskets, a trunk of locks and window sashes, and hopped on a wagon bound for the wharf. He handed over his ticket and boarded the Sutton, bound for California. He was 26 years old. 204 days later, he arrived in San Francisco. Whaley worked hard for his employer, George Wardle, earning $600 a month, and before long, he was able to purchase and open up his own stores, including a grain business, and buy land for a house. But bad luck hit in 1851, when most of his stores burned down during the Great Fire. Adding to that was the news that Anna Lene, a young woman who he had been courting for months, would not be joining him, since her mother refused to let her come to California. Whaley cut his losses and headed to San Diego for a fresh start. Whaley loved sleepy little San Diego, telling his mother that it had the climate of Italy. The beachy end of town had only about 50 residents, and the other end, the old Spanish end, had about 250. There were only a handful of stores, 2 hotels, and an apothecary shop run by a doctor friend of his from New York. The only church, a Catholic one, was in someone's house. Whaley and his business partner, a man named Louis Franklin, who was also a lawyer, immediately opened a store in the Old Town, which also served as their residence. Whaley began taking Spanish lessons so he could expand his business deals. Things were a little tense in 1851 when San Diego fell under martial law, and Whaley found himself just one of 35 men left to defend the town from the advancing Cupeño fighters led by Antonio Gara. Basically, the U.S. government had tried to tax the indigenous people, and they weren't happy about it. A, because losing their land to the white settlers, and B, because they were told they had to pay taxes. Whaley survived, and when his partner Franklin decided to buy the Exchange Hotel, Whaley continued on his own. His general store, the Tienda General, was doing so well that he decided he would go back to New York and win Anna's hand. He did, by the way, and brought Anna back to San Diego with him. Within 4 years, he owned a brick-making business and had purchased 9 plots of land, essentially catapulting himself towards owning a business empire. With his granary, brick-making, and general store, he decided it was the right time to begin building a magnificent house for Anna, his wife. Construction on the brick house began in 1856. He spent a good chunk of money on it, but he also struck a bunch of deals where he had paid the builders and craftsmen in trade. The front of the house included 5 pairs of French doors with panes of glass that were each a foot tall. A covered veranda extended from one side. Inside, the house was divided into 3 main rooms on the first floor, each with 12-foot-high ceilings. Each room served several purposes. For example, the office doubled as a music room, and the guest room doubled as a sick room. The second floor included the master bedroom and nursery. The whole property was surrounded by an adobe wall, and there were several outbuildings, including a granary and a corral for branding cattle. They had fruit trees, including orange, cherry, and pomegranate, and they had an impressive vegetable garden. Although the house was gorgeous, and Whaley wrote in several letters to his mother that they were very happy, Thomas and Anna did suffer some tragedy early on. First, their son Thomas Jr. died at just 17 months old of scarlet fever on January 29, 1858. And then, not long after, Whaley's store on the plaza burned down. It was determined that the fire was caused by rats that had chewed on matches. Plus, Whaley had concerns that his brand new house was haunted. According to USGhostAdventures.com, from the moment Whaley moved in, he was worried that the ghost of James Yankee Jim Robinson was there with them. Yankee Jim was a notorious horse thief who had been sentenced to death by hanging in San Diego in 1852. He was brought to the gallows across from the El Campo Santo Cemetery and put on a mule cart with the noose around his neck. But Yankee Jim was tall, and when the cart was moved, Yankee Jim's feet could just barely touch the ground, which meant his death was by strangulation.
Not a pleasant way to go.
Not at all. The irony is that Thomas Whaley allegedly witnessed the hanging, and the land that he built his grand house on was the site of the former gallows. When Thomas began hearing heavy footsteps walking on the floors over his head, and Anna began fearing that there was a dark presence in the house, the couple couldn't help but wonder if Yankee Jim had cursed the land. Perhaps the store fire and the death of Thomas Jr. was part of that curse. In 1859, Whaley accepted the position as Commissary Storekeeper, USA, and in 1867, he was sent to Sitka, Alaska, to set up stores and establish a base of operation. So, he literally went to Sitka and claimed it for the United States. Meanwhile, the brick house in San Diego sat empty. Anna had taken the children to San Francisco, where she stayed with friends. While they were gone, the 1867 earthquake shook San Diego and cracked their house in several places. In 1868, Whaley leased the second floor of the house to Thomas Tanner, a theater company owner. Tanner erected a stage for theater productions. Allegedly, one of the members of a traveling theater group died unexpectedly in the theater itself. When he returned from Alaska in 1869 and their family was reunited, Whaley leased the office in his house to the county to be used as their courtroom. One of the Whaley sons, Frank, served as a judge there. Over the years, according to one of Whaley's daughters, the office was also used as a billiards room, a kindergarten, and a Sunday school. But then, in 1882, tragedy struck the Whaley family again. According to U.S. Ghost Adventures, on January 5th, Thomas and Anna hosted a double wedding for two of their daughters, Anna Amelia and Violet. During their honeymoon, Violet woke up to an empty bed. Her new husband, George, was gone. He left nothing but a note saying that he'd only married her for her money. Heartbroken, Violet returned to her parents' house in San Diego, where she took one of her father's guns and shot herself in the chest. According to lore, she died in her father's arms under the arch in the parlor where Yankee Jim had been hanged years before. Violet was just 22 years old.
That's sad.
News of Violet's suicide quickly spread throughout San Diego, and Thomas's businesses began to fail. The grieving family returned to San Francisco. Thomas Whaley passed away at the age of 67 in 1890.
He was young.
That he was.
But you consider he packed a lot into that life.
Well, like we've said in other episodes, some of these men seem to pack 2 or 3 lifetimes, if not more, into one lifetime. They just do so much and accomplish so much.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
it is.
That's a lot of drive. His son Francis tried to turn the former family home in San Diego into a tourist attraction in 1909. But still, the once grand mansion on San Diego Avenue fell into disrepair. Francis and his siblings continued to live in the house until their deaths. And for a while, George Whaley tried communicating with the spirits that he felt still lingered in the house, including Yankee Jim, his father Thomas, and his sister Violet. When Corinne Whaley took in boarders to bring in some money, they never stayed for very long. They claimed that the house was too haunted. It wasn't until 1956 that the city of San Diego agreed to purchase the house and restore it. Today, it's a museum that offers daytime tours, and because it quickly earned the reputation of being the most haunted house in America, they offer paranormal investigations also. First, there's the general spookiness that happens in the house that employees and guests have witnessed, like unexplained noises, flickering lights, cold spots, footsteps, and disembodied voices. But there's also the chandeliers that gently swing back and forth or even spin ever so slowly, as if someone has pushed them. Plenty of debunking has been done, like checking window drafts and the effect of people walking on the second floor, but nothing seems to correlate. And speaking of windows, the ones in the Whaley House have been known to both open and shut on their own.
You know, a window shutting on its own doesn't sound necessarily paranormal to me because windows have been known to kind of slowly close on their own if they're the kind that you push up and down. But a window opening on its own, I think, is a little harder to explain unless it's the kind that you push out instead of lifting up. But either way, it's a little weird.
Yeah, or it could be like ours that have weights on them, that the window just, if you slightly push it, the window will go up because the weights come down, the weight of them.
Yeah.
So who knows, but it sounds like they're trying to debunk stuff.
Yeah.
The same could be said of the rocking chairs that occasionally rock back and forth on their own. And then there are the mist, dark shadows and orbs that seem to manifest inside the house and have been photographed by hundreds of visitors. You can actually check out photos that people have submitted on the official Whaley House website. There are also several reports of people hearing things in the house that don't make sense, like the faint sound of someone playing a piano, even though there isn't a piano in the museum, and of a dog barking. Children have been heard laughing, crying, and playing, and on a few occasions, it sounded like a party was going on in the former courtroom, even though the room was empty. And even the dining room seems to hold some residual energy, since it's been reported that staff have heard the clink of dishes and utensils on plates, as if a dinner party is in full swing. The strong sense of fresh baked bread or even pies often wafts through the house, although the baking smells generally occur only around the holidays. Sometimes visitors have even had to leave the Whaley House because after they felt a cold breeze waft over them, they've immediately fell ill.
That's a lot going on in that house.
It's quite a bit. That's probably why it's called the most haunted house in America, supposedly. And that's just the general spooky stuff. I haven't gotten into the apparitions yet. There seem to be 7 of them.
Damn.
The first is the lady in green. She's always seen in a green dress, but nobody has been able to figure out who she might be. Second, there's Yankee Jim, the spirit that Thomas and Anna Whaley believed haunted their house from the very beginning. More recent reports include hearing the sounds of heavy boots walking across the floors, just like the Whaleys once heard them. But people have also reported seeing a tall, lanky man standing in the corner in their peripheral vision. And there's that archway in the main parlor that allegedly stands over the exact spot where Yankee Jim was hanged. Visitors to the Whaley House, who don't even know the history, have reported feeling like something is tightening around their neck as they've walked underneath it. It's rumored that during one of the daytime guided tours, a tall, lanky man in a costume joined the group and followed just behind the young female tour guide. Although she never noticed him, all the people on the tour did, and at the end, they asked her who the costume man was.
Those types of stories always freak me out.
Yeah, I always like when there's somebody added to the tour that nobody knows who they are.
Yep.
Yankee Jim also seems to know when police officers are part of the tours. It's been said that guests who are involved in the law often complain about the sudden sensation of a rope burn around their necks. For years, Yankee Jim was considered an ominous, dark presence, but that more recently, he seems to have calmed down a little bit, although he's definitely still there. Then there are the ghosts of both Thomas and Anna Whaley. Anna is reportedly a calm and positive entity. She's often spotted tending to her garden or puttering around the main floor of the house. The strong scent of expensive French perfume usually precedes or follows sightings of her. More than anything, her spirit seems to be still tending to her family, either folding laundry in the nursery or cooking in the kitchen. Sometimes she's been seen taking a little break in the parlor. She was seen sitting on one of the settees. But at times, she's also protective of the second floor, and employees have felt the need to ask for her permission to come up the stairs. In the 1960s, TV personality Regis Philbin invited paranormal investigator Hans Holzer and his medium partner Sybil Leek to join him at the Whaley House. Regis later went on several talk shows, claiming that he had seen Anna's spirit for himself. She had appeared like a shimmering lady in white who vanished in front of him. Regis had gone to the house and spent the night because he wanted to see a ghost for himself. He said, quote, "All of a sudden, I noticed something on the wall. There was something filmy white. It looked like an apparition of some kind. I got so excited I couldn't restrain myself. I flipped on the flashlight, and nothing was there but a portrait of Anna Whaley, the long-dead mistress of the house."
Good old Regis.
I used to like Regis Philbin. I thought he was pretty funny, and I remember this story.
You do?
Mm-hmm. Thomas Whaley, on the other hand, is not as calming of a presence. In fact, people describe him as quite grumpy. He's usually seen on the second floor landing, glaring down at people as they ascend the stairs. He was once fond of Cuban cigars, and there are reports from people saying that they actually felt as if a puff of cigar smoke was blown in their faces. But he's also connected to the sound of a man's happy laughter coming from the second floor. So perhaps he's not grumpy all the time. In general, it seems as if Thomas and Anna like that their home is a museum and welcomes many visitors. But there was one day when they apparently had had enough. According to hauntedhouses.com, after a long day of heavy visitor traffic, the staff at the museum heard the sound of the front door and all the windows locking at the same time. Even though it wasn't quite closing time, the staff honored the Whaley's wishes and closed up early.
I think I probably would have closed up early too. It's a pretty clear sign they wanted people out.
The fifth spirit at the Whaley House is believed to be Annabelle Washburn, a little girl who once lived next door. Annabelle's story is pretty sad. Allegedly, while running around the Whaley's yard, Annabelle ran into a clothesline and was strangled. Now, there isn't any historical record of Annabelle dying this way, but there is definitely the spirit of a 4-year-old red-headed little girl at the Whaley House. She's often seen outside, smelling the flowers in the garden. She's also been seen inside the house, both playing with toys in the nursery and playing in the kitchen. The last 2 ghosts said to haunt the Whaley House are 2 of the Whaley children, Thomas Jr. and his sister Violet. Thomas Jr. was only 17 or 18 months old when he passed away of scarlet fever, and so his spirit tends to manifest in a way that a toddler might have behaved in real life. He's been heard crying in the master bedroom and laughing in other rooms of the house. There are also reports of hearing the sound of a small child running overhead on the 2nd floor. Violet, his sister, who took her own life after being left by her new husband, is said to be a sad presence. Visitors have claimed that while standing in her former bedroom, they have felt unexplained cold chills and then as if someone has touched their hair. But she's also been seen in the parlor, standing in the archway. In many ways, it does sound like the Whaley House could be the most haunted house in America. And for those people who are interested in doing a paranormal investigation there, it is possible. The Whaley House offers investigation packages where they supply all kinds of equipment, including FLIR cameras, ghost boxes, and REM pods. The investigations last for 2 hours and are $94 a person.
Which is funny, since last week when we were talking about Shepton Mallet, remember how it was $94 or $96 a person?
For the whole night.
For 12 hours.
Well, this is the U.S.
Right.
Must be those tariffs taking effect, you know.
On what? The REM pods?
Must be.
But anyway, it does sound like a really cool place.
It really does. Well, there you have it. The Loudun Possessions and the Whaley House.
2 creepy stories, perfect for October. If you want to know more about the Loudun Possessions or the Whaley House, you can always check our sources in our show notes.
And with that said, join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
And don't forget to send us your ghost stories. See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.